Hey everybody, Mark Lieberman here. Let's talk about culture. We're going to talk about a lot of different aspects of culture, and as you might imagine, our culture permeates and affects just about every part of our lives. Today we're going to look at 5 different aspects of culture. We're going to look at the keys to success. I'm going to offer you right up front some simple easy ways to go about your intercultural communications to generally have a good chance of success. We're going to look at culture and co-culture. We're going to look at in-group and out-group. Are you starting to see a pattern here? We're going to look at high context and low context cultures. And we're going to look at individualism versus collectivism. Yes, a lot of the ways that we can look at culture, it's helpful to think of it as operating on a continuum. That is a sliding scale. People don't fit neatly into boxes, and neither do cultures. So first, let's take a look at the keys to success. There are 2 most important things to remember about intercultural communication. These are really important and that I've cultivated through my professional career and in bringing to you. The first one is to have a positive attitude. Assume good intent. Assume that the person that you're communicating with is trying their best, is trying to bring a quality aspect to your communication in somehow, whether it's at work, whether it's socially, whether it's an exchange at a store. If you assume that they're trying to do good and you're trying to do good, it's a lot easier to be comfortable with ambiguity, getting comfortable with things being vague, not really knowing what's going on. It's totally fine to have that happen in intercultural exchanges, and in fact, it's usually the case. So let's first take a look at what is culture. Well, the definition we're offered is that culture is the language, values, beliefs, traditions, and customs that people share and learn. As you might imagine, like everything else in communication, it's a learned skill. This is something we learn. We are not born into the world bathed in a culture like these cute little children. We learn it growing up. And we say please and thank you in most of these cultures, and we learn that as we're growing up. That's a cultural custom. And in fact, every part of our entire human existence is based in culture. It's everything that you use to perceive what's going on in the world around you. So then what's a co-culture? A co-culture is a membership in a group that is already part of the larger encompassing group. It's basically that all cultures live together in a single geographic area without anyone being necessarily better or worse than another, even though some people may think so. The area that we live in is a great example. The general culture, you might say, is general, like quote unquote American culture. But we have tons of great subcultures that are both cultural and behavioral. Let's take a look at a number of them. First one is age, obviously. Your experience being a younger person in the world is going to vastly differ from your experience being an older person in the world. And you belong to a sort of smaller culture when you hang out or associate with people within your culture. You see things the same way oftentimes. You oftentimes use the same language. You're interested in the same type of activities and subject matters. Race and ethnicity, right? Lots of times, especially when it comes down to language, we learn our culture and our lives from those around us as we're growing up. And they very much can be colored by our ethnicity. Sexual orientation. If you're hetero, if you're ambiguous, if you're homosexual, right? We tend to hang out with people that are like us, and it can certainly, provide a number of different interests that you might have in common. A physical disability, whether it's obvious or not. I have a pretty rough form of dyslexia. Reading it can be incredibly difficult for me, but people can't actually see that. But if someone has a physical disability, say they're in a wheelchair, you can see that physical disability and it will guide your existence so that you can associate with people with those same aspects in their lives. Our language, obviously, right? That kind of makes sense. Our religion, whether it's obvious or not. Different activities and interests. A good example of this is like gamer culture. People that really like playing video games, they certainly have their own little co-culture. They have different ways of doing things. They have a language that they use to describe. They get excited about certain activities and interests that they have in common. And affiliation with a distinctly different culture. The easiest example of this is people that are children of immigrants, that they might not themselves look like they're from a different country. This might not be so obvious, but if they grew up around a lot of people, or even just parents that are from, say, somewhere in Africa, then that's going to, be part of them, and then they will bond and affiliate and really feel like they have something in common with other people from that distinctly different culture. And so we also have something that leads out of these experiences called in-group and out-group. In-group is essentially groups with which a person identifies, like they feel a part of. Say if you're a gamer, you feel a part of gamer culture, and when you're with these people, you're in that group. Out-group is groups that we view as different than us. Maybe they're not a part of gamer culture. Maybe they only speak one language. They don't speak the language you learned first. Maybe they're of a different religion. This is totally normal and totally acceptable. The thing is to keep in mind is we're often lured into a false dichotomy, which means a choice of two things that sets up a competition between in-group and out-group. It becomes the false dichotomy, the false opposing views of one group versus another group. It artificially sets up a competition, essentially because we are tribal creatures. There's a great video you'll watch about that. We tend to want to help people in our own tribe. So it comes to the detriment of people outside of our tribe. It sets up that competition. Currently, we see this a lot in our national co-cultures. I think you can see that why we have some issues in this country getting along. You can see those as in-group and out-group. And we also have different ways that cultures communicate. So let's take a moment to look at high context and low context cultures. This one can be a little bit confusing. So first, let's get our definitions right out. What do we mean by context? This is usually the one that throws people. Context, in this particular instance, is the circumstances or settings for an event, a statement, or idea. And the key thing is that it provides the terms of understanding these messages. So it's not the message itself, it's everything else around it. It's what the message is bathed with, right? For an example, if you got a gift, that gift might be the message, but how it's wrapped, whether it comes in a box, or somebody just threw it in a paper bag, stapled it shut, and gave it to you, can have a lot of meaning surrounding that particular exchange. Like, where does the message reside in the context it is delivered? Or does the message reside in the language itself? If the message resides in the language itself, we say that the context is of a low context environment, right? If it resides in everything that goes with it, that's high context. And there's some simple definitions. Low context cultures use language to express thoughts, feelings, and ideas very explicitly. Like most of Western culture, like American culture in Western Europe, Canada, Australia, we do this. We really focus on the words we use. Whereas a high context culture relies a lot on nonverbal cues to sort of maintain a social harmony so we can all get along. The easiest one to think of is in a business situation. In a Western style business situation, America, Western Europe, people meet, they get down to business right away. They get their terms, like we're going to do this, we're going to do that. They get their business done, and then they'll get to know each other afterward. Maybe everybody go out to dinner afterward. In a high context culture, it's kind of the other way around. People don't want to offend each other. They're really interested in keeping that social harmony. So whereas a low context culture might be comfortable saying, "Oh no, that we don't think that's a great idea," kind of right off the bat, and nobody gets offended, right? It might be taken as somewhat of an affront in a high context culture. So you might not want to call out that you don't like a person's idea. You'll use your body language. You'll say, well, that sounds good. Let's see what other options might be there, to sort of deliver the message that maybe that's not your favorite option. And like I said, everything operates on a continuum. So on the left, we have low context cultures, right? These Western sort of cultures we were talking about. And on the right, we have high context cultures. Cultures that you mostly find in Asia, Africa, right? China, Vietnam, Japan, a lot of West African cultures like Liberia, or even East African cultures like Kenya and Ethiopia. In a lot of Arab cultures in the Middle East are going to be that high context. And there's this real interesting connection, it turns out, that the countries that tend to prefer the cultures that tend to prefer low context in communication, in their past, they have had a lot of contact with outsiders, right? And people in the Western world tend to travel a lot more. America itself is made of immigrants, so we're used to interacting with people from a lot of different cultures. And people from high context cultures, at one point in time, not now, but back in their history, they didn't have as much interaction from people with a completely different culture. Like China is huge, right? And it's been around for at least a couple thousand years. And as the culture was developing, it was a lot easier to use subtle cues to say what you wanted to say rather than having to come right out and say it. So this obviously affects our business situation, right? There's a lot of work-based learning in this course. So this is an interesting graph, and you'll see it also on Canvas. And it talks about different cultural differences and what styles that they tend to use and what styles that they tend to employ in different ways. So you can see on the low context column, we'll look at sort of like decision making. So it's logical, linear, and rule-oriented. We're going to make decisions this way, and we're going to apply everything to this rule. Whereas in high context, it's intuitive, it's relational. You sort of make decisions based on, well, who's in the room? Well, what do they feel? Let's see, how do we feel about this situation? Versus low context may go with the solid facts. It's thick stuff. There's more about it coming up. But first, let's take a look at individualism and collectivism. These are two different ways to look at culture, and in fact, two different ways that members from a culture sort of view themselves and how they fit into a particular culture. So the first one that we're going to take a quick look at is individualistic culture. These are generally these Western cultures that use low context communication. It's really great. The low context, high context tends to apply to individualistic and collectivist cultures. So individualistic cultures tend to be low context communicators. America, Canada, the UK, Australia, those types of things. And they tend to view their position in the culture as their primary responsibility is to themselves, like the individual, like in the immediate family, right? I sort of take care of me, I take care of my family, we're very rugged, we count on ourselves, that type of thing. Whereas a collectivist culture, they feel more of an obligation to the extended family, the larger group, the society as a whole. They feel more of an obligation to the group than they do to themselves. And neither's right and neither's wrong. It's just different ways that cultures have come to look at their position in the world. And let's take a look at a couple graphs that make it easier. So we're looking at traits of collectivist culture. There are social rules that promote selflessness. It's really good to give to the group. When they're thinking about what they're going to do, maybe they would think about what would be best for society as a whole rather than what would be best for them at that point. And their families and communities and the health of those communities really play a central role. I'll give you a quick example. In a traits of a collectivist culture, especially like if you go to a place like Japan, you'll see less litter in the big cities, in Tokyo. And mostly because people will take the time to pick it up and throw it in a garbage can, right? But at work, a person may not necessarily want to take credit for this great idea they had because they don't want to embarrass the other people on their team. They want it to come forth as the team had this great idea. Whereas in individualistic cultures, that particular team idea would be backwards. We tend to celebrate the individual. We tend to want to focus on like our different triumphs. And when we talk about this type of thing, individualistic cultures really kind of get a bad name. The way that we talk about it, they get a bad rap. There's a lot of good in both cultures. So individualistic cultures, we like to think about how we're unique. We are our own special person, and we are different from those around us, and that's a good thing. We think about autonomy, which means we get to be able to make our own decisions in our own lives. We have free will, so to speak. We think about independence. We have all these options to do what we want. Choose what career path we would like to have. Choose what job we would like to have. And in fact, where we would like to live. And self-sufficiency. We try to rely on ourselves. We value people that can use some of their skills to solve some problems. And now, these things aren't really good. These things aren't really bad. It's entirely your opinion. There's not necessarily one way that is better than the other. It's just the way that cultures tend to look at themselves. And a final on individualistic cultures, that same work situation where a person had a great idea. In individualistic cultures, we really celebrate that person. Wow, what a great accomplishment. Maybe at a big meeting, the regional manager would call that person up on stage and be like, look, this is Jennifer, and Jennifer had this great and fantastic idea, and she worked with Lydia. Let's get Lydia up here. And everybody claps, yay, right? But for someone in a collectivist culture, this would probably be pretty embarrassing, because they don't want it to make it look like they think they're better than their team. So in a collectivist culture, that regional manager might just ask the whole team to stand up while everybody turns and waves and claps and says, ooh and ah, and people on the whole team would take credit and then sit back down. It's just different ways that we choose to celebrate each other. So keep in mind, the important thing, and this is important, the keys to success. The most important things to keep in mind when interacting with other people from other cultures, when you're having an intercultural communication, is to have a positive attitude. Assume this is going to go well, that this person's trying to make this exchange go well, just like you are, and get comfortable with ambiguity. Ambiguity is things that are ambiguous. They're vague. You don't really know what they mean. If you can get comfortable that you're not going to know what all of this interaction means, and I think they're doing good, and I'm trying to do good, so let's just go with it. Your interactions with people from different cultures will be significantly more successful. So today we looked at the keys to success. We compared cultures and co-cultures. We compared in-groups and out-groups. We looked at high context ways to communicate versus low context ways to communicate. And we looked at a couple different cultural perspectives, a couple different cultural dynamics that seem to come to the surface of individualism and collectivism. Thanks for your time. Have a great day.